Dear students, I welcome you all to this lecture on concept of sustainable development. The main objectives of this lecture are to understand the meaning of sustainable development, to describe the scope and importance of sustainable development, to analyze the underlying principles and premises of sustainable development, to discuss various dimensions of sustainable development and the need for integration of the various dimensions of sustainability, and finally, to appreciate the nature of our concern for sustainable development goals. So, let us begin with introduction. Sustainable development has an important role and place in the discourse on development and environment. Sustainable development is the center of debates and discussions among the development experts, environmentalists and national leaders of both developed and developing countries. The United Nations and its agencies, as well as many international institutions, commissions and world leaders do recognize the importance of sustainable development. We all know that most societies aspire to achieve economic development to secure higher standards of living both for themselves and for future generations. They also seek to protect and enhance the quality of their environment now and for their children. Reconciling these two public needs and demands is at the heart of sustainable development. Sustainable development aims at meeting the basic needs of all people in general and the poor majority in particular. Besides this, they also care for their employment, food, energy, water, housing, etc. by ensuring the growth of agriculture, manufactures, power and services with due consideration for environmental concerns along with the needs for development. As the World Commission on Environment and Development has observed, the efforts to achieve sustainable development are being carried out amidst the additional pressure of such global difficulties such as climate change, ozone depletion and species loss. The continued build-up in greenhouse gases, depletion of the ozone layer by chlorofluorocarbons and the continuing extinction of species through habitat degradation affect developing nations no less than the developed and industrialized states of the West. The ongoing excessive use of energy feeds a number of these difficulties, as do the growing global population increases. These problems are so pressing that the terms environmental refugee has been coined to describe people literally deprived of a homeland because of environmental crisis. Some of the more pessimistic observers of the situation warn that social dislocations from environmental degradation may be one of the most alarming developments in the first quarter of 21st century, with estimates ranging to 60 million odd environmental refugees. The policy makers are beginning to increasingly recognize that socio-economic development must be sustainable. That is, it should be capable of meeting not only the current needs of this generation, but those of future generations as well. Accordingly, in this lecture, an attempt has been made to answer the fundamental questions like how to assess the well-being of present and future generations. What should we leave to our future generations to maximize the chances that they would be no worse off than ourselves? Now, coming on to the meaning of sustainable development. Sustainable development basically merges economics and environmental science both in theoretical and practical perspectives. Several other articulations consider sustainable development as a process of development by which various environmental, economic and social benefits can be simultaneously and concurrently maximized. These articulations suggest that sustainable development, in short, is a blend of economic, social and ecological approaches, each of these being indispensable and complementary to each other. Sustainable development is in fact a pattern of resource use that aims to meet human needs while preserving the environment so that these needs can be met not only for the present generation but also for generations to come. Much before the Brundtland Report's definition of sustainable development in the early 1970s, the term sustainable development was coined by Barbara Ward, known as Lady Jackson, founder of the International Institute for Environment and Development in the early 1970s. Sustainable development for her was largely about people, their economic and social well-being and aspirations for equity in their relationships with each other in a context where environment, society imbalance could threaten economic and social stability. The legacy of the concept of sustainable development is, however, attributed to the Brundtland Report or the report of the World Commission on Environment and Development entitled Our Common Future, which defines it as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Thus, it seeks to satisfy the compulsions of equity within the human generations and also between them. According to the Brundtland Report, the idea of sustainable development reaches far beyond environmental protection, as it means a process of change in which exploitation of resources, direction of investments, orientation of technological development and institutional change are made consistent with future as well as present needs. It's not a fixed state of harmony, but rather a balanced and adaptive process of change. In essence, sustainable development is a process of change in which the exploitation of resources, the direction of investments, the orientation of technological development and institutional change are all in harmony and enhance both current and future potential to meet human needs and aspirations. This understanding or definition were strongly endorsed by the World Development Report in 1992. The concept of sustainable development rejects the traditional view that economic development is a necessity and environmental protection is a luxury. Thus, resource conservation and pollution control, once thought of as luxuries, are now recognized as essential to protect life-supporting natural systems and improve the living standards. The policymakers are beginning to increasingly recognize that socio-economic development must be sustainable. That is, it should be capable of meeting not only the current needs of this generation, but those of future generations as well. Sustainable development does not focus solely on environmental aspects and issues. More broadly, sustainable development policies encompass three general policy areas: economic, environmental and social. Now, nature of sustainable development. Keeping in view what we leave or pass on to our children and grandchildren, we must think of the full range of physical and human capital and natural resources that will determine their welfare. Adopting the principle of sustainable development would necessarily require a fundamental change in thinking. The data used for decision-making must reflect the true costs of resource depletion and pollution as they affect future generations, rather than just the short-term costs of profits of depleting income-producing resources. The data must take account of future needs on par with current needs, not discounted in a way that carries decisions in favor of short-term effects. Siri Casey Wantrup has emphasized on the use of safe minimum standards for conservation by avoiding over-exploitation of critical zones of the environment by limiting human activities that makes it uneconomical to halt or reverse environment degradation. Thus, the idea of sustainable development requires a careful consideration of sustainable threshold levels for both economic and environmental systems. For example, Deforestation may be necessary for agriculture development in a regional economy like Brazil, but it could prove fatal and detrimental to global ecological stability. When a country experiences rapid population growth or dramatic urbanization, increase in gross national product or GNP may hide or camouflage major development problems. The same difficulty arises when the world demand for the raw resources from a country or a region rises to meet increasing global needs. In sum, until we are prepared to define sustainability in ways that take stock of both the external threat from food policies in the north and the internal threat from demographic pressure in the south, it will remain illusory. Similarly, to cope with the growing problems of land pressures in India, it's necessary to check and control the population growth rate, ensure balanced livestock development, and control land alienation. On the other hand, when the World Commission posits that sustainable development requires that the adverse impacts on the quality of air, water, and other natural elements are minimized so as to sustain the ecosystem's overall integrity. It's not an easy task to judge the success rate. Recognizing these difficulties, the World Commission has noted that measures of success in sustainable development must take account of the context and the need to meet social challenges. The sustainability aspect requires that environmental administrators aim at maintaining ecosystem and related ecological processes essential for the functioning of biosphere. Sustaining biological diversity by ensuring the survival and promoting the conservation in their natural habitats of all the species of flora and fauna. Observing the principle of optimum sustainable yield in the exploitation of living natural resources and ecosystems, preventing or abating significant environmental pollution or harm, establishing adequate environmental protection standards, undertaking or requiring prior assessments to ensure that major law, policies, projects, and technologies contribute to sustainable development, making all relevant information public without delay in all cases of harmful or potentially harmful releases of pollutants, especially radioactive releases. It was considered at the Rio Summit 1992 that the Brundtland Report in 1989 lacked a clear definition of sustainability. The World Bank's Environment Department now has formulated a new definition. It is in two parts. Number one, output guide. That is, waste emissions should be within the assimilative capacity of the local environment without degradation. And second, input guide. That is, harvest rates of renewable resources should be within the natural regenerative capacity. Depletion rates of non-renewable resources should be equal to the rate at which renewable substitutes are developed. Now coming on to the principles of sustainable development. Sustainable development is viewed as the mutually beneficial interaction between the legitimate interests of business and the economy, government and the polity, and civil society and culture. However, these societal interactions do not exist in a vacuum. On the physical and material side, society is bounded by the carrying capacity of the varied ecosystems, landscape ecology, and ultimately the biosphere of the earth or the nature. On the psychological and spiritual side, the threefold functional differentiation of society is contextualized by the caring capacity of individuals. Some of the principles or premises underlying the concept of sustainable development include the following. Sustainable development is an alternative design for development which by definition should be environmentally benign and eco-friendly. That the present generation should meet its needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, that is, to ensure that the productive assets available to future generations are not unfairly diminished. That those who enjoy the fruits of economic development today must not make future generations worse off by excessively degrading the earth's exhaustible resources and polluting its ecology and environment. That there is a symbiotic relationship between consumerist human race and producer natural systems. That environment and development are not mutually exclusive. Healthy environment is essential to sustainable development and healthy economy as well. That economic development which erodes natural capital is often not successful. That environmental mistakes of the past need not be repeated, as the past patterns of environmental degradation are not inevitable. That development is not growth only, it should stand for broader goals of social development. That sustainable development in the long run has to do with ecology, resources and people, along with their service agencies, institutions and other aspects of their social organization. That sustainable development has two major aspects: internally sustainable development and externally sustainable development. Without both, no real sustainable development would exist. That sustainable development is largely accountable to the poor, and hence it should ensure that the poor have adequate access to sustainable and secure livelihoods. Now, talking about dimensions of sustainable development. Basically, sustainable development has four main pillars or dimensions. They are social, economic, environmental and institutional. However, in recognition of the growing importance of information and communication technologies and the role they play in development, a fifth dimension, that is information and communication technology, is added. Let's now briefly discuss these dimensions one by one. So, number one, social dimension. The imperative of the 21st century is sustainability, to raise the living standards of the world's poor and to achieve and maintain high levels of social health among the affluent nations, while simultaneously reducing and reversing the environmental damage wrought by human activity. Sustainability issues are generally expressed in scientific and environmental terms, but implementing change is a social challenge that entails, among other things, international and national law, urban planning and transport, local and individual lifestyles, and ethical consumerism. Development is considered to be socially sustainable when it achieves social justice via equitable resource allocation, eradicates poverty, and provides social services such as education, health, etc. to all members of the society, especially the most needy ones. The social dimension of sustainable development is thus based on the notion that man constitutes an important means of development, and its prime target should be to strive to achieve this notion for both present and the future generations. Social sustainability is one aspect of sustainable development. Social sustainability encompasses human rights, labor rights, and corporate governance. In common with environmental sustainability, social sustainability is the idea that future generations should have the same or greater access to social resources as the current generation. Social resources include ideas as broad as basic human rights and all other cultures. Second, economic dimension. Economically, sustainability means providing economic welfare to people at present and in the future, while paying more attention to the natural capital. It means and includes the natural resources of economic value considered as the basis for the economic system, such as plants, soil, animals, fish, and bio-environmental system such as air and water purification. Sustainability thus interfaces with economics through the social and ecological consequences of economic activity. Sustainability economics represent a broad interpretation of ecological economics where environmental and ecological variables and issues are basic but part of a multi-dimensional perspective. At present, the average per capita consumption of people in the developing world is sustainable, but population numbers are increasing and individuals are aspiring to high consumption Western lifestyles. The developed world population is increasing only slightly, but consumption levels are unsustainable. The challenge for sustainability is to curb and manage Western consumption while raising the standard of living of the developed world without increasing its resource depletion and environmental impact. This must be done by using strategies and technology that break the link between economic growth on one hand and on the other environmental damage and resource depletion. Number 3, environmental dimension. An ecologically sustainable system maintains a solid base of natural resources and avoids excessive use of such resources. This involves the conservation of biodiversity, attaining atmospheric balance, productivity of soil, as well as other systems of natural environment which are usually classified as non-economic resources. In tackling sustainable development problems, environmentalists tend to focus on what is known as environment borders. As a concept, it means that each natural environment system has certain limits that should not be exceeded by excessive consumption, or else deterioration in natural system is irrevocable and inevitable. Therefore, from an environmental point of view, sustainability means setting limits for consumption, population growth, pollution, and the faulty ways of production, including wasting waters, cutting the forests, or erosion of the soil. Number 4 is institutional dimension. The institutional dimension of sustainable development is concerned with the participation of all community members in the decision-making process and the acquisition of the information that affects their lives transparently and accurately. It's also concerned with organizations such as councils and committees charged with the implementation of various aspects of Millennium Development Goals. Now, 5th point is digital dimension. Information and communication technologies, that is ICTs, are closely related to the already discussed 4 dimensions of sustainable development. The Millennium Development Goals and the recommendation of the International Summit for Information and Communication Technology held in Geneva in November 2003 provided a suitable methodological framework on how to make use of ICT in achieving sustainable development. Therefore, the digital dimension has been added as a 5th dimension of sustainable development. Now, talking about SDGs of the United Nations. The United Nations created a set of 17 distinct but interrelated goals to guide global development between 2015 and 2030. The SDGs, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by all UN member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. The 17 SDGs are no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reducing inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and partnership for the goals. The SDGs pay attention to multiple cross-cutting issues like gender equity, education, and culture cut across all the SDGs. To achieve sustainable development, many sectors need to come together. The economic, social, political, and environmental sectors are all needed for all critically important and interdependent development decisions. Progress will require multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary research across all these sectors. This proves to be difficult when the major governments fail to support it. According to the UN, the target is to reach out to the community as widely as possible. However, data or information must adjust for vulnerable groups such as children, elderly, and persons with disabilities, indigenous people, migrants, and internally displaced persons. There were serious impacts and implications of COVID-19 pandemic on all 17 goals in the year 2020. Hence, sustainable development is both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge can be converted into opportunity when due consideration is given to its essential ingredients, some of which are identified as: without adequate environmental protection, development will be undermined, and without development, environmental protection will fail. Economic growth need not be an enemy of environment, and the best policies for environmental protection will help, not hurt, economic development. Elevating poverty is both a moral imperative and a requisite for environmental sustainability, and there exist substantial synergies between elevating poverty and protecting environment. Without population control, sustainable development is neither possible nor feasible. However, great may be the efforts. Sustainable development is equitable development, the development that does not bypass the poor and does not deceive the disadvantaged. Attending to the problems created by accelerated pace of industrialization and urbanization is very essential for sustainable development. Dear students, to conclude today's lecture on sustainable development, we can say that during the past 20 years, there has been a growing realization that the present practices of development are unsustainable in nature. In other words, we are living beyond our normal means. Our way of life is placing an increasing burden on the planet with a great stress on sustainability of development. Sustainable development focuses on improving the quality of life of all the Earth's citizens without increasing the use of natural resource beyond the capacity of the environment to supply them indefinitely. It requires an understanding that inaction has consequences and that we must find innovative ways to change institutional structures and influence individual behavior. It's about taking action, changing policy and practice at all levels from the individual to the international. Sustainable development is not a new idea. Many cultures over the course of human history have recognized the need for harmony between the environment, society, and economy. What is new is an articulation of these ideas in the context of a global, industrial, and information society. Unless we start to make real progress towards reconciling these contradictions, we face a future that is less certain and less secure. We need to make a decisive move toward more sustainable development, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's in our own long-term best interests. It offers the best hope for the future, and whether at school, in home, or at work, we all have a part to play. Our small, everyday actions add up to make a big difference in this regard. So, dear students, that's all on this topic. I hope you enjoyed learning about concept of sustainability. I'll see you soon with another lecture in development administration. Till then, take care of yourself. Goodbye.